Here's what's coming up next on Deconstructing Respectability from Holy Smoke, Cigars, and Spirituality.
To acknowledge the places that a lot of us come from, we have been itching to be free. We've been itching to find a space where we can be rebellious. We've been itching to find comrades to fight back against this harmful. We've been itching. So we want to a lot of times break every rule, say F everything. I'm not doing that. I'm not wearing that. I'm not saying that. And we don't think it through to the end. And the next thing you know, you being bombarded with backlash that you didn't prepare for because you were impulsive in your rebellion.
Is the juice worth the squeeze? Because my itinerary dried up when I decided I'm going to be myself. And then they said, well, you can't come back here. I had to sacrifice that income in order to be myself. I encourage you to be aware of that because, there's a cost associated with everything. This is a Therapy N Theology edition of the podcast. So that was me and Pamela, aka NFL. For those who are wondering, NFL stands for Not First Lady, a name Pamela earned because of how much she rebels against the politics of respectability. So who better to have this conversation with than a therapist preacher's wife who rejects the First Lady label? But before we get into all of that, thank you for your patience this week. I know we're a day behind with our release. The past few weeks of my schedule have been very intense. You may have seen the recent interview I did on the Jamal Bryant podcast. So, it's been fun to navigate the diverse feedback that we've gotten from that interview. Also, since the last time you heard from me here, we have recorded an episode of the Holy Smokes podcast called Deconstructing Christian Nationalism with April of Joy. We've also recorded Black Women in African Spirituality 8. The full recording of each episode is available in the TFC virtual Patreon community. You can subscribe to any paid tier to watch those replays on demand. And for the people who refuse to start another subscription, I feel you. You can purchase the episodes a la carte in Patreon. The link to our Patreon community is in the show notes. One last thing before we dig deeper into this conversation about respectability politics with Pamela. I want to acknowledge the many people who have asked if I can do a course on Greatest Commandment Theology, which is the theological framework I introduced in my book, Breaking All the Rules. If you're interested in walking through my book one topic at a time, I have the perfect opportunity for you. If you want to understand the foundation of our one rule that we honor each other's lived experiences, I have the perfect opportunity for you. It's called Day One. Day is spelled D-A-I. It stands for Disruptive, Authentic, Inclusive. Day One is our live discovery course at the Faith Community where we walk through the tenets of our theological framework. It's like doing a 10-week book study with the author and their colleagues. Myron the Mystic is teaching a session on navigating biblical authority. Pamela is teaching a session on spiritual bypassing. I'm teaching a session on sin consciousness, so on and so forth. Day One starts on Sunday, April 6th at 11 a.m. Eastern. Registration is open now. If you want to participate in this 10-week course, all you have to do is subscribe to any paid tier in our Patreon. There is no additional cost once you're subscribed. Registration is free. You can attend each session in real time. You can also watch the replays on demand. So join us for Day One beginning April 6th by subscribing to the TFC virtual Patreon community. Again, the link is in the show notes. Now let's get into this Therapy N Theology edition of the podcast where Pamela and I address the politics of respectability, specifically in the Black community. You know what to do. Pull up a chair, light a stick if you want, and pour a dram if you please, as we deconstruct harmful theology and build beloved community one cigar at a time. Let's get to it. All right, so we're back. We're deconstructing harmful theology and building beloved community one cigar at a time. It is the Therapy N Theology edition.
We haven't done one of these in a while.
Yes. Therapy N Theology edition of Holy Smoke, Cigars, and Spirituality. Do you want to tell people what Therapy N Theology is, like how it came to be?
Do I want to tell
I
people
mean,
the origin story?
not everybody knows. Not everybody knows what therapy and theology is.
So I am a licensed therapist, licensed clinical social worker. And so I'm always looking for ways to kind of bring that into spirituality and our wholeness and our well-being. And so this is years ago. I don't even remember when at this point, but we were sitting in the bed. It was probably like 11, 12. And I had an idea of I wanted to put something together for the ministry that involved therapy, and I wanted it to be specific. And of course, I felt like
Pacific.
Right.
You wanted it to be Pacific. You got to say it right now.
Yes, I wanted it to be Pacific. And while I was sitting there thinking about it, it was like, oh, what, I have the therapy part, as I'm always reading and studying things. And then, Christian is always reading and studying. And I was like, oh, what if there was a merger and it was therapy and theology? So, because I'm one of those people who believes in both and I don't believe we should neglect one for the other. If theology and scripture and Bible is important to you, I believe that is absolutely a part of your mental health and your well-being. I also don't believe that you should abandon any type of potential therapy in whatever ways you find it, whether it is talk therapy or body therapy, somatic therapy, whatever it may be, that you don't abandon that either if that is something that's going to be beneficial for you. So I just wanted to merge the two.
Yes, and Therapy and Theology was born in that moment. This is Pamela's brainchild. Yes, and this was also around the time where she really, really got into religious trauma, like the study of religious trauma. And I say all the time that Pamela is the main reason that the faith community is a trauma-informed community of faith. Like, I have learned much of what I know about trauma from partnering with her. I've done some reading as well, but a lot of my learning as it pertains to trauma has just come from being in conversation with my old lady.
Yes. Oh, I couldn't wait to be called, and not like couldn't wait to be called like I needed a partner, but like I thought my old lady was always cool. So I like to be called, somebody's old lady. Because shit. And I did because I don't know if I have talked about this with the community, or hell, we on the internet at this point, but right now I have taken a step back from actually practicing because I'm trying to work on some things that involve my own mental health. So I realized that I couldn't do that and be as beneficial as I needed to be as a therapist. So I'm not practicing at the moment, but that also frees me to put more time into therapy and theology and put more time into ways to, keep the community informed and educated. So I did want to say that I might not be doing one-on-one appointments, but I'm shifting that energy to put, which is why spiritual bypassing is going to be one of the sessions for day one. So yeah, I just wanted to put that out there because I don't think I talked about that.
No, you haven't.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's Therapy and Theology, and it's still holy smokes.
Yes,
so we got to give you the one rule. So Pamela's gonna do that for us too. What's the one rule, baby?
The one rule is that we honor each other's lived experiences and we don't uplift theories over what people have actually lived. Healthy debates are welcome, but kindness is key.
Yes.
And if you aren't kind, then your ass will get dragged, in the words of Lord Thurston. And they'll get dragged in all the names, in the words of Rich Auntie. Yes. And that That one rule comes from Greatest Commandment theology that has been curated, researched, and thought about by our very own Bishop TikTok, Pastor Christian A. Smith. And that says that your love for God is displayed through how you love your neighbor, which is an extension of how you love yourself. Therefore, you can't fully love God if you don't love your neighbor, and you can't fully love your neighbor if you don't love yourself. And that comes from Matthew, the 22nd chapter, the 34th through the 40th verse. Amen, lights.
Amen, lights. Yes, thank you for that.
I felt like somebody should have been saying, read, reader, so I could, really muster up the...
Oh, I would have done it as you said something.
No, you're just supposed to be in tune.
Oh, my bad. I guess my spirit of discernment is off.
It's the snow. It's the ice.
We'll give you this instead. All right, y'all. So in true therapy and theology fashion, of course, we're talking about deconstructing respectability today. But we always like on these episodes to, get started with checking in with how we feel. So we got this emotions chart. For those of you who are active in our Patreon, every Monday we do Mood Mondays, where we give everybody an opportunity to check in with your feelings, with your mood.
And that's not just for play, y'all. Christian and I talk about that often, how we spend so much time going, thinking, planning, making schedules and to-do lists. We don't take time to stop and just check in. So Mood Monday, although you may have seen these memes floating around everywhere on social media, that is a very intentional thing to get our community to just pause for a second.
Yeah.
And just pay attention to what's happening with your mind and your body. So yeah, if you see that, feel free to engage it.
I want to encourage you, don't ever let a mood chart pass you by without taking an inventory of your emotions.
Quick second.
I mean, just I'm telling you, it just does something for you when you stop and think, what am I feeling? How am I feeling? There is a sense of I don't know, it's grounding for me. It's a grounding exercise.
If you do it with intent. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been using this mood chart right here from an artist named Just Flow. He's a Chicago-based artist. And it's a Black Like Me mood chart. Pamela, how are you feeling today? What kind of mood do you have?
As I lean in, because I'm an old lady.
Nah, I ain't even that. Because we on this little daddy computer.
On the little daddy. Oh, okay, there we go. Magnified for the woman of God.
Yeah.
Blue is one of the ways I'm feeling. Disappointed. I'm incredibly disappointed. And that disappointment is not because I had expectations that this was going to go another way, but I'm just disappointed in humanity in general.
And when you say this, you're talking about the election, inauguration?
Yes, the election, the disregard for people's humanity, the disregard for people's safety. Like I'm disappointed in humanity. Yeah. So I'm blue. I'm blue.
I'm a mix of uncomfortable. So the one that says something don't feel right. I'm a mix of uncomfortable and chill or calm. My thing recently has been to just try to keep it steady. That's been a really for me because I always have a lot on my plate, and the ministry has been going through transition. So like my whole team is transitioned over the past 2 years, and that's been a big thing. And then the ministry has been growing, and that's been a big thing. And now we're trying to relocate, and that's a really big thing. And then
who is we? You gotta say we. You gotta say who we is, because we're talking of, there's
me and my family,
personal and faith community.
Yeah.
People might not know who.
On a personal level, we trying to move, right? Trying to consolidate some things. That's a lot of stuff to deal with. So I just try to keep it steady. Because I feel like that's the best thing I can do, because I always have more stuff on my plate than I have time to address. And the biggest challenge in my life, or like not the biggest challenge, but one of the biggest challenges of maintaining a sense of equilibrium is to be like, okay, I'm not going to worry about that right now. Like, and it might be important, but it's not more important than the other stuff. So I got to prioritize, which means sometimes I got to leave things considered important undone because it can just be overwhelming. And it's helped me. If you want to, take that and use it for yourself, I welcome you to. There's some stuff that I used to think like, oh, I got to do this. I got to open all of this mail. I got to respond to every email. I got to respond to every DM. No, you don't. I got to accept every invitation. I got to respond to every question. No, you don't. No, you don't. Yeah. And we see, let me see some folks. Yeah, Blue. We looking at the comments here to see what the
Derek said. He is both angry and sad.
Yeah, it's real. It's real. I wish a motherfucker would.
Listen.
I feel you. Yeah, it's rough times, which is why community is important. I was glad that we had this scheduled 2 days after the inauguration, because like really, when I put the schedule together, I wasn't considering that the inauguration would be this week. But when everything kind of panned out, I was like, I'm glad that we did that, because we'll need some time to be together as a community. All right. So yeah, take an inventory of how you feel, y'all. Take an inventory of how you feel. It's real important as we go, so you can be in touch with what you're feeling. All right. Not only do we talk about what we feeling, but Pamela and I met through music.
Indeed.
We are music heads. We listen to
most
music.
Of our dates.
Yeah, like most of our dates are going to concerts or festivals. Like, we love music. Did y'all hear about City Winery? Did y'all hear? So for anybody that does go to City Winery,
that has one in your area
for live events, like, because they got it in Atlanta and Chicago and different places. So City Winery just added this like $25 minimum bar tab or food ticket or something when you go to a show at City Winery, which is a problem because City Winery's food is mediocre and their wine ain't even that great.
Dun, 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 dun.
So,
but they have fantastic artists come through for a very decent price. So the fact that they're doing this makes me feel like something is up, and it's not just they're trying to make more money. It's like, is something happening with this location? Like,
yeah,
that's really unnecessary.
Yeah, I don't like it at all. I don't like it at all. But yeah, that's been one of our main spots that we go to. We're gonna have to,
have to replace that with something.
Yeah, we're gonna have to see what happens. But like, we like to talk about what we've been listening to. So, Pamela.
Yes.
What you been listening to? Tell the people.
Been listening to the spirit of the spirit of the Lord.
That's not what
I'm playing. I'm kidding.
Let me try to act like you say. Yeah, she still ain't baptized.
I'm just kidding.
She ain't even baptized.
I'm just kidding.
When you gonna let me take you up under the water?
What have I been listening to? I have been listening to Doechii's new album. I can't even think of the name of it now. The alligator still bites out, something like that. I've been listening to that on repeat. And the other album that I have just been, that I cannot seem to get away from, is Tyler, the Creator's new album. Yeah. It's like Chromacopia is just like on repeat over and over and over and over. So yeah, randomly walking around singing songs, and Christian is like, who is that? But
I love the Doechii album.
Just listening to two different things right now.
I haven't listened to Tyler, the Creator's album yet, but I'm going to. I've heard great things.
Alligator bites never heal. Thank you, Jada.
No, there you go.
Thank you, Lil Sib. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna get into Tyler, the Creator's album. Like, my musical taste is more so like the vibe, and like Tyler, the Creator's music hasn't given me the vibe that I look for. I understand that like a lot of people who I respect his lyrical content and his creativity, but it hasn't like really struck me on a musical level yet. But I've heard that this one might really resonate with me. That's what Pamela said based on what she knows about my taste in music.
Yeah, especially that second half of the album. I think you could ride that out.
Yeah, so I'm gonna get on it. And what I've been listening to is Kamasi Washington,
My Lord,
Heaven and Earth. It's a 2018 album, so this is 7 years old now. I can't believe this is 7 years old. But I go to projects that just like make me feel good, and Kamasi Washington is one of those artists. Yeah, because I'm drinking this Coca-Cola. Kamasi Washington is one of those artists that gets me in a mood. Like he makes movement music. He puts you in the mindset of like John Coltrane, late John Coltrane, when he was much more experimental. And he's an amazing composer. If you've listened to Kendrick Lamar's latest album, Kamasi Washington did a lot of composing on Kendrick Lamar's album. He's like talented like that. So yeah,
Kamasi is spiritual to me. Kamasi feels like if you don't listen to instrumental music, if you don't listen to straight jazz with no lyrics, if you don't just listen to instruments, Kamasi can be overwhelming. But he reminds me of Pentecostal church. The energy that he gives to that saxophone, it's like really high church. So it's full of energy. It's amazing to experience in person too. It's amazing to experience him in person. Absolutely.
Speaking of jazz, did you know that one of the activities that was stigmatized in the name of respectability politics was jazz?
No.
In the early 20th century, when the politics of respectability were like really introduced, they didn't want people to engage in jazz music because it wasn't respectable. Like every expression of Black music is stigmatized when it is introduced. So when we were growing up and hip hop was stigmatized, like it was the same thing with jazz music at the turn of the 20th century.
Until old Mary Kate and Ashley get a hold of it. Caleb down the road, Cody, gets his hands on it. And then it's like, it's the best thing ever.
Yes. Jazz was bumping grind music back in the day. Yes. And now it's like, it's old man music.
Yeah, old man music. Like jazz, where the beat at? Where the lyrics at? That's what my nieces would say. Where the lyrics at?
Absolutely. All right, we're gonna keep it moving. Yeah, the respectability piece is just big. But first, we gotta go to one of our favorite segments of Holy Smokes. You know what it is.
Reaching for the stars.
All right, reaching for the stars. This is going to be an interesting one. It was posted in the Holy Smokes group in the TFC ecosystem. It's a clip from a platform called Tonight's Conversation. It's created by a creator named Ace Metaphor. So, he has like a lot of different people on this platform. They talk about relationships, and somebody shared this and was like, I don't like this. Let's talk about it. So we're going to play it.
And if you are irritated by gender wars, prepare your heart and mind, because that is the direction we are about to go in.
Yeah, let's do it. I don't remember this guy's name, but yeah, he's always on the platform. Here it is.
We hear women come up and talk about how successful they are and how intimidated men are, and they never say a word about their character. And I just can't help but think about how turned off women get when men lead with money and lead with accomplishment and end up having nothing but unavailability and coldness and lack of emotional development, because that unfortunately is what it takes to succeed in certain career fields. You can look it up. And for some reason, women think that the success that they've amassed has somehow happened without them becoming devoid of a lot of the personality and relationships that men are devoid of. And they flex their accomplishments and money the same way men do. And somehow we make it different every time. Every time. No disrespect to you, but you didn't say about being a good woman. Nothing.
Why
You didn't say no.
I'm just
Fuck all that, bro. Didn't say nothing
I
about.
can tell you what.
This is about a larger point. This is not about her as an individual. We don't hear I'm successful, I got my degree, and I've been in therapy the last 3 years working out my issues. I just bought a house, and I also identified my childhood trauma, and it took inventory over my baggage, and I got it out the way. Oh, also, I'm loyal. My time management is on point. I do what I say I'm going to do. I'm considerate. We never hear any of it. What I hear is when say that y'all act like, when men say that y'all have turned into alphas, what we're talking about is the worst parts of manhood. Y'all have taken it on. Now, the problem with men is that we won't admit that those are the worst parts of us too. But shorty, y'all have taken the worst parts of what it means to be successful, and y'all wear that like a badge. Look at what it's done to us. If you need an example of what it looks like to only live in your accomplishments, look at the black men around you. You in a city full of them. Look at how devoid they are. Look at what it took them to get to where they are. Look at how underdeveloped some of them are emotionally. This is what you want? Is this what we're gonna do, to let accomplishments be band-aids for that?
Okay, I'm gonna start by saying I've never seen this man before. I've never seen this show before. Today, as we were preparing for this was the first time I had ever seen it. And I was so thoroughly annoyed. First of all, because it's clear that he's triggered. That's the first issue I have with it. And what I need you to do when you get riled up like that is acknowledge that whatever happened before that clip started, whatever she said, rubbed him the wrong way. That's the first mistake you made. The second thing is I cannot stand the whole gender, the behavior based on gender concept, as if this isn't about human behavior, period. If all you can do is lead with your performance, that isn't about being a man. That isn't about taking qualities from an alpha male. It's just that you may not have any depth. You may not know how to hold a conversation. You may not know how to engage because maybe you spend all of your time in the comments on social media. So you have taken this experience or multiple experiences that he's probably had in the past and made this generalized statement about how women have taken the worst parts and the worst characteristics from men, and then they've embodied them. So now when he said when we go on dates, but this is really about him. When I go on dates, y'all sit down in front of me and you tell me all of your accomplishments. I don't want to hear about that from anybody. I don't want that to monopolize the conversation, whether I am with somebody that I have a potential romantic interaction with or whether I'm meeting with somebody platonic. I don't want you to run down that list. Then he backs it up by saying, you didn't tell me how much of a good woman you were. You didn't tell me how loyal you were. You didn't tell me this. You didn't tell me that. How about I don't need you to run down that list for me either? How about you just show and prove? This isn't about gender. This is about, okay, this person is writing their accomplishments and they don't seem to be interested in me. They don't seem to maybe not be interested in sharing their hobbies, some lived experiences. There's no building of anything. And you're just reading me your resume. I don't care if the resume has Fortune 500 companies and accomplishments, or if the resume has all of these great qualities. I don't want a list. I just want to get to know you. I don't want you to list either. And I'm definitely not about to sit down with somebody that I am trying to get to know and talk about something as personal as my therapeutic journey. I don't owe you that. I don't owe you that.
I don't want to hear about your childhood trauma in the first couple of weeks of
I don't owe you that. I don't owe you that.
Hi, Christian. My name is Christian. Good to meet you. So what have you been working on in therapy?
Come over and touch some grass. Touch some grass. This is about human behavior. This is about people. This isn't about men versus women. That's so immature and childish to me.
Yeah, I get where he was trying to go, like Makila said. I understand where he was trying to go. I don't watch tonight's conversation. I see clips from time to time. So I've seen him, and Derek said his name was Tripp Fontaine, and that sounds about right. That sounds like
Tripp.
That sounds like something I've heard before. And I generally don't have a problem with what Tripp says. I think the problem is the basis of the conversation, like you were just saying. If you ground a conversation about relationships in a gender binary, you're always going to run into that. Because then it becomes y'all women this, y'all men this, y'all women this. And that's just not the way we engage in conversations about relationships in our space, because we recognize that human behavior is not relegated to gender. So like Pamela and I have same gender loving friends who are coupled, and we'll spend time with them and talk to them about, the living our lives and the challenges that we face. And across the board, we'll discover that a lot of the challenges we have in our relationship, our same gender loving couple friends have the same challenges.
Because it's about human behavior.
Yeah, it's about human behavior. It's not about your gender. And there's a lot to be said for patriarchy and how women and men are nurtured differently. There's a lot to be said about that. However, when it comes to relationships, it's not as much about gender as the binary will lead us to believe.
Yep.
And like I said, I understood where he was trying to go, but to Pamela's point, it's better to speak of your own experience with people, right? Because this whole thing could have gone off totally different had he just said, in my experience with women, the women that I have dealt with, this has been my experience. When you say that, no one can take that away from you. But when you say, man, women be this and women be that, it's like, bro, chill. Because it's not all women, but you can have your experience. Yeah, so you can say, this is my experience with women. And then you ask somebody else and they say, oh yeah, I've had the same experience. I'm like, oh, so many of us have had the same experience. That's how I came to learn like how terrible the church has been to Black women, because all of these Black women I know just kept sharing with me their individual experiences. And I was like, oh, here's a trend. But that still doesn't represent every church. It still doesn't represent every pastor, but it sure does represent a whole lot. So if you just talk about your own experience, then you don't get into this space of painting everybody in a particular gender with a broad brush. And that's where the problems generally come up in these conversations. I think they're just doomed from the beginning.
And can I just add my little personal 2 cents, just because, I know that the dating pool it ain't just pissy, but it's got like dirt in it and leaves and all that stuff from last year and previous years, and probably got a little mold too. Just a word of advice, because I am a woman and I did date. Guys, if you are interacting with women, if you are looking to be partnered, and I can only speak from my perspective, the moment you turn something into a gender war, you are no longer attractive. You're not attractive no more. You could have been the dude that I was going to give some play, and you can take that however you want to. And I have now gone from what could have been the pool in your backyard to the Sahara Desert. Okay? Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. And I'm telling you this for your own sake. I can't speak to what's unattractive to the guys or to our other non-binary and other gender identifying siblings, but to women, when men turn stuff into men against women, boys against girls, first of all, we think you childish. It's not cute. And then we be unattracted and we just leave. So, yeah.
Yeah, the gender wars are just corny.
It's not cute.
And that's what happens when your conversations about relationships are strictly heteronormative.
Yep.
And heteronormative just means that heterosexuality is the default, right? So there isn't even any conversation outside of men versus women. So you leave out so much nuance when you only understand relationships from the perspective of how men relate to women.
Yep.
And this is something that I have learned over the past decade, because growing up, my life was heteronormative. Like, yeah, that's the default. But now that I understand how much more expansive the world is, we're leaving so much out by strictly having conversations, having relationship conversations from a heteronormative perspective. Like, let's break free from that. But I understand that's the platform. That's what they do. That's what their audience is interested in for the most part.
And it's easy. I always feel like resorting to people do stuff because they're a man or people do stuff because they're a woman is very easy. And sometimes it's used as a cop-out because it's harder to live in the nuance of the way people behave. And it's easier to just assign behavior to people because they are, you know, have been assigned male or female at birth. It's easier to do that, and it's more work to look into the gray area. But it's more attractive to be in the gray. It's more attractive to discuss nuance. My Lord.
Yeah, it's just more work. It's more work. So yeah, this is how we feel about gender wars. Everybody who's out here getting into all the gender wars, we want you to know you have been
reaching for the stars.
Yeah. I'm just let's just leave. Can we leave gender wars in 2024? Can we please do that?
My Lord.
Because Black people got too much on the line,
my Lord,
to be fighting in gender wars. I just feel like we got too much on the line, and that's part of the reason why we can't get ahead, because we doing so much fighting with each other. Yes. All right, y'all. The politics of respectability politics. Boy, this is a huge topic. It is something that Pamela and I talk about all the time. It is something that impacts the way many of us move through the world, which is, you know, that's the basis of all the conversations we have. We talk about stuff that impacts the way we move through the world. We don't have like trivial conversations on this platform, not like big trivial conversations.
Trivial is, well, yeah, I was about to say that's like pre-show.
Yeah, we'll drop some trivial stuff in here, you know, the here and there. But like when we're really digging into something, we're not digging into trivial matters. And this is just another one of those situations where respectability politics impacts how we move through the world in ways that a lot of times we don't even recognize. So we want to uncover some of that in this conversation. And to get us started, we're going to share a video from Christina Brown. We shared it in Patreon earlier this week. So we're going to share it here again to kind of direct the rest of this conversation about respectability politics. So here's Christina Brown. You can follow her on multiple social media platforms. She's a brilliant young thinker, womanist, advocate, all of the above. So here's Christina.
And she's a comedian.
Yes. So here's Christina talking about respectability politics.
I also want to know why advocating for us to go in public looking like we care about ourselves and how we look is deemed as respectability politics.
This actually has a lot to do with respectability politics because the term was coined by a Black woman. Surprise! Evelyn Brooks Higginbotham, in her Righteous Discontent, the women's movement in the Black Baptist Church from 1880-1920, talks about the use of the Black church, right, in like social, political reform, and specifically the Black woman's, the African-American woman's role. And in the process of Black women in the Black church trying to, you know, pave the way and make their space known in these social political movements, right, and using the Black church to do so, they had to enact the politics of respectability. And the politics of respectability, or respectability politics, was seen as something important to enact because that was the way to get the social political reform. And it was supposed to challenge the individual, in this case Black women in the Black church, to combat stereotypes that were already against us, to be seen and deemed as more respectable. And there were two audiences for this. We needed white people to deem us more respectable, and we also needed to do this within the Black community. So cleanliness of oneself, of one's property, having sexual purity, good temperance, being nice, polite, not too mean, feminine, all of those things that Black women needed to do in order for us and the Black community in its entirety to receive social, political reform and civil rights. So fast forward to now, it absolutely is tied to how we as Black women view ourselves and view other Black women, and how they dress, what they wear, what their hair looks like, how they're presenting themselves, how they're holding themselves. It has roots in respectability politics. People talking about you can't wear a bonnet out in public, you can't wear pajama pants in public, you can't wear this, look like that, has roots in respectability politics. And so does the Black church, but you know, that's a whole other video. If you want to hold and carry yourself a certain way, that's your own prerogative, right? You can do that. But the issue lies when you try to, one, police other Black people and Black women specifically and how they do it, and two, you align certain actions, certain looks, certain appearances, certain behaviors with value, right? Value in a person's personhood, value in them having rights or receiving services. That is when it's respectability politics. Hope that helps.
Yo,
she's brilliant.
Yeah.
Christina's brilliant.
Yeah, she really is. And she brought something up for me with the whole sexual purity piece and how that's a part of respectability politics. So like those of us who, you know, came up in purity culture, like, you know, part of that is connected to respectability politics, because at the turn of the 20th century, where this study is based, right? Dr. Evelyn Higginbotham, who wrote Righteous Discontent, where she introduced the concept of the politics of respectability. She wrote about a time period that's starting in 1880 going through 1920. And in that time period, Black women were being highly over-sexualized by the mainstream narrative, the mainstream white narrative. And then that was also the time where Black men were being painted as brutes and rapists.
Sexually aggressive.
Yes, that was the time where we got the Birth of a Nation film, which took the country by storm and like helped to launch the media industry. And it painted Black men as rapists who were coming after these innocent white women. So you have Black women who are being sexualized, and then you have Black men who are being seen as brutes all at the same time, which gives birth to this study. And
then you have the Victorian era and all of the Victorian morals and principles. So if you look into the Victorian era, it talks about very, very strict gender roles for men and women. And I can imagine that being in a Baptist church and having this moral code, this European moral code, which included sexual purity. It included very strict rules about men and women and how women should not even be involved in the spaces of men, how they should look, how they should talk, and the duties and the roles that they should carry out. When I went and I looked into it, I was thinking to myself, oh, this sounds like church.
Yeah.
This moral standard sounds like church. So if you're being seen that way, and then you get presented with this European standard of morality that aligns with your church doctrine, it's easy to blend the two, because the Victorian era had a whole lot to do with the concept of the respectability.
Yeah, because
the compass.
Black church spirituality is West African, and Black church theology is white evangelical fundamentalist. Like the theology, the doctrine. I tell people all the time, like, look, I don't think Christianity at its core is terrible, the Roman Empire version of it can go to hell. Mm-hmm. The version of Christianity that was imposed on our ancestors, that we were pretty much forced to embrace so that we could survive, and then we found ways to, sneak our own spiritual practices into it. That version of Christianity can go straight to the hell that I don't even really believe in anymore. Mm-hmm. So we were talking about it earlier, like how respectability politics was rooted, like Christina said, in how white people viewed us, how white people viewed Black people. But then it was also like how Black people viewed each other. And we were talking about it earlier about how, we do stuff so that white people can see us a certain way. But then when we're not even around white people, it's like, dang, ain't nobody looking at us now while we still performing. And then we had this discovery like, oh, white people aren't looking at us, but white God is.
White Jesus is watching.
God is always watching.
Yep.
And if you got this vision of an old gray-haired white man in the sky who's looking down on you with your every move, which is what many of us were given, that's how they control our behavior, even when white people not looking, because white God and white Jesus are looking.
And even if you grew up in a space where your Jesus was brown or Black, you still, the attributes of the gaze, the judgmental gaze that we got from white people are placed on God and Jesus. So even if your Jesus is brown at your church or in your grandmama's house, it comes with the same judgment. It comes with the same level of like, this is the only standard.
Yeah. So, oh yeah, I should do that, shouldn't I? Mm-hmm. So what did you learn, right, in preparation for this conversation? Because we've been talking about respectability politics for a long time, but we went deeper into the study of it for this because it's become a part of it's become a part of like, the culture. Like the word I'm thinking of is nomenclature. Like just.
Thank you for putting culture first.
Yeah, like the way we talk, like you can look up respectability politics on dictionary.com. Like it's that imprinted on the culture. But for this conversation, we really dug deep into the work of Dr. Higginbotham. So like, what did you learn just in preparation for this?
Man, I learned, first of all, I learned a lot about Dr. Higginbotham in general, because I had heard her name, but I hadn't looked into her work and how well studied she is.
they said they said I got to get the dollar jar.
Well,
I feel like I didn't actually like define it beforehand. Whatever. All right. So, now you can talk about what you learned about Dr. Higginbotham.
Yes. So I learned a lot about her, which was fascinating to me. I listened to a few of her public speaking videos, and I thought that they were really good. What I did not know until recently is the way ethics undergirded the respectability. I've always known that this was about, we need to make ourselves presentable. We got to work extra hard. We got to be extra neat. Hair has to be extra straight. But I had not read her analysis on the way it was integrated with the Black Baptist women and how that was used, not just for the white gays, but also for the gays within the community, because it was like a trickle down effect. Mm-hmm. So that was one of the things that stuck out to me. And the other thing was how we have moved away from the necessity of the ethical undergirding. And now it's all about presentation.
Yeah.
It's all about what you look like instead of how this how this helps you in this environment. It's more about, well, if you wear that, or if you look like that, or if you talk like that, then you don't care about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. It shifted the focus. We were talking about this earlier about how originally the politics of respectability was rooted in how white people viewed us and how we were trying to get more social standing in the country. Because remember, this is a study within like 30 years of slavery ending, right? This is the time period that we're dealing with. This is when the politics of respectability gets introduced. So it started with like, look, white people are trying to paint us in this way. One way for us to get ahead is to push back against the stereotypes that they make against us. So the focus was on how other people are viewing us. But over time, it switched, and now people make it about how we view ourselves. Mm-hmm. And that's a big switch, going from how other people view us to now, if you don't operate within these parameters, it's about how you view yourself.
You don't care about yourself.
So, yeah. What was that?
She said, do you think it's also through the lens of the safety of Black people? Absolutely, because perception will determine your safety a lot of times. If we look at all the hashtags we've put all over our social media over the last few years, a lot of those people were unalived because of perception. So absolutely it ties into that. If you are perceived a certain way, most of the time people are going to interact with you based off of what they perceive about you. So if they perceive that you're sexually aggressive, if they perceive that you're ignorant, if they perceive that, you know, whatever they come up with in their mind, it can shift the way that they interact with you, the way that they judge you, the amount of grace that they give or not give to you. So yeah, it's absolutely tied into safety. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, I hope that the conversation will help to nuance our perspective on respectability politics, because there's definitely that negative component that causes us to question our own self-worth. But as Dr. Higginbotham wrote, and as she has said in lectures since, like, that was only one side of it, right? There was an aspect of it that actually pushed back against some of the oppression that came at Black people, specifically because of these Black Baptist women. And she says, like, I watched a couple of her lectures, and she was like, I'm not talking about the bourgeoisie in the Black community. I'm talking about the service workers, the underclass. Yeah. And it was more so about the right to self-determination and not about politeness, which is what a lot of us get policed for. Are we polite enough? But so there is a nuanced perspective here where there are times when you got to engage in respectability politics. Like, if you're trying to get ahead in a certain space, like, I don't dress the same way in every space. And this is, as a Black man, we understand that respectability politics is rooted in the story of Black women. And now it has been adopted and adapted by so many different people. But I can say for myself, like, there are certain things that I do in certain places. So I know if I'm going into the bank to get a loan, I'm going to put on a collared shirt. I am going to present myself in a certain way. I'm still going to be me, but I'm not going to cuss in that conversation, right? People get mad at me all the time for cussing because I'm a pastor. You're not supposed to cuss. And I tell people, like, look, if you come to my platform, you can't tell me how to talk, especially because the movement that we've started, the community that we've built, was built with me cussing the whole time. Right. So I don't have to perform respectability in that way on my platform. But there are spaces that we all go into where we're looking for some measure of acceptance. And if we want to be accepted in that space, then yeah, there's a game that we do have to play. And then we each have to decide, do we want to play that game or just not be accepted in that space? So that's like a very important distinction there. It's not always bad. You just got to know how to leverage it.
And I was gonna follow up what you said, and Jasmine said it in the comments, time and place. Because I think about it when I think about respectability. I learned the difference that I was in conflict was the difference between ethics and etiquette. And Christian helped me understand that earlier today. My aunts, my dad's older sisters, and my grandmother were all domestic workers. So presentation was huge. The way you looked, what you wore, what your hair looked like, how groomed you were was a big deal, because that was the position that they were in, where their looks made a big deal. And because that was their livelihood, when they nurtured me, they didn't mean to harm me and make me self-conscious by focusing so heavily on the way I looked and whether my hair was neat and my clothes were straight and I had on a dress and all of this stuff. But they were projecting onto me what was projected onto them. And for them, it was a matter of their livelihood, their jobs, their bills getting paid depended on that. So it also, what I learned was that to come across like you had etiquette gave you value. And Black people needed to feel value from white people at that time.
Gotta understand the context.
My aunts needed to feel valued by their employees. As disrespectful as some of them may have been or snarky, they needed that. They didn't have other places where they felt that value. And their work that they did, the cleaning up, the cooking that they did, they took pride in that. So they needed to feel valued. And the way that they got that affirmation wasn't on just the work that they did. It was also in the way that they presented themselves. So they passed that to me, that presentation part. And I've had to do a lot of work, even down to my locks. I've had to do a lot of work on the way I present myself, the way I look, my hair, all of that. Now at home, my daddy talked about respectability from the perspective of sometimes you have to play the game in order to get your foot in the door. You get your foot in the door and then you figure out what you can do on your own. But sometimes you got to play the game a certain way to even have your voice heard. So it was etiquette on one side and ethics on the other. And I understand both. And I understand that in my personality and the way that I choose to live authentically leans more on ethics than etiquette. So when people see me or hear me as the pastor's wife and they quote unquote hear me talking crazy or hear me cussing or they see what I have on, I understand that disrupts their idea of first lady etiquette. I get it, but I'm not here for the sake of etiquette. I'm here to treat people right. I'm here to make sure I treat myself right. So I get the respectability because I follow respectability when I go to restaurants. I follow respectability in order when I show up to sorority meetings and events. I follow respectability in places that have rules and regulations inside of their facility. To me, that's also respectability. If they say no hat, no jeans, no tank top, then I got to come correct if I want to spend my time in this facility. I just think it's a time and place. And there's a difference between the respectability as far as your aesthetic versus your ethics. You
just made me think about being in college. There was a spot in Huntsville, Alabama called Sammy T's. It was this like nighttime spot. I think they still open. I mean, they may have changed the name. And Sammy T's is just one example, but it was predominantly a white spot. but Black people would go. And I remember there was a time where I think too many Black people started going, so they changed their dress code and they specifically identified things that predominantly Black people wore. Right? That is respectability politics. So now, if you Black people want to come here, you got to change the way you dress. That is respectability politics. Dr. Higginbotham talks about, like, you know, if we see on the news that a guy named Bill Johnson killed 5 people, Black people ask, I hope he wasn't Black. Was he Black? What color was he? That is respect.
Saying you haven't done that, I don't believe you.
Right.
Depending on how heinous the crime, I don't believe you.
Yeah, we like, please don't let him be Black. Please don't let him be Black. Or we be like, I know he ain't Black. Right? That's respectability politics, because Black people are seen as a group and we are lumped together in how white society sees us. White people are the only people in America who have the privilege of not being seen as a group, which is why they get so offended when you refer to them as a group, because they have the privilege of being an individual. We aren't granted that privilege in this particular system, in this particular context. Like, what one Black person does is a reflection on all Black people. And I'm not saying that's true. I'm saying that's the perception. Yeah, that's the perception. And perception creates reality. Right. So even if it's not true, it is still some people's reality. So you know, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I was thinking today when I was listening to another one of Christina's videos, and she said, rebellion isn't respectful. And Pamela, the place that I came from religiously was so strict and so confining, and I felt like a hostage for the longest in my mind, in my body, in my beliefs, that the way I live my life out loud now at this age, at 46, is a sheer act of rebellion. The way that I talk is an act of rebellion. And I'm not saying that to say that it's not me, because it is, but I spent a long time masking me. And I've decided that I'm not doing that anymore. And my boldness and my assertiveness and the way I laugh loud and the fact that I season my sentences with cuss words and I don't take no shit is an act of rebellion when I look back on where I come from. And my rebellion is not going to be respectful to everybody. And that's okay. That's okay. Because I ain't hurting nobody. But it's not going to be respectful, because if it was respectful, it wouldn't be rebellious. So, I mean,
you know what? For that, we gonna introduce this new video. That was good. And for those who remember, when we first started Holy Smokes, Tiger Gibson was one of our cast members. And a lot of folk don't know, Tiger Gibson has some amazing footwork when it comes to a shout. And I believe what she just said deserves a shout. So we about to give this a Tiger Gibson shout.
It ain't happened yet, but...
Get it. Get all of it, Tiger Gibson.
He got that foot work.
Yeah. I have to be honest. And I've talked to Christian about this, and I've talked to several people within the community that I have close relationships with. I've talked about the way the perception of first ladies has impacted me throughout my life. And it's one of the reasons why I prefer not to be called first lady. It doesn't bother me the way it used to.
Because it used to be.
Yeah, it used to bother.
Oh, that's how she would respond.
I was triggered. It would trigger me. But what I have had to do, honestly, y'all, is I have had to be okay with being myself in this type of public. because being insulated within the faith community where people are unpacking things and opening their minds to different ways of living, ways of being, ways of connecting, are more patient and more understanding of, oh, okay, so this is not the idea of a first lady that I grew up with or that I had in my mind. That still weighs on me though. Christian will tell you it weighs on me because I know the perception that people have about first ladies and how they're supposed to work committees quietly, and not say nothing and not show any sign of emotion unless it's glee or tears, happy tears. But that's just not me. And I refuse to be anything other than me. And Christian will tell you when we go places out of town, or he has to speak somewhere or preach somewhere, and people want me, first lady, come sit on the front row, come in here to the first lady study. And all of this stuff makes me really anxious because I just want to be. But I also understand that there is a role that people have in mind. And so I go back and forth about what people can and can't handle. And it can be a struggle because I'm not going to be rude, but I'm not going to abandon who I am, because I worked really hard to grab her by the hand and be really secure. But I still contemplate what other first ladies especially are going to think when they run into me.
I'll be so tickled when they ask her, do you want to come sit on the front row with the first lady? She'd be like, nah, I'm good. I'm going to go to the back. I'm going to sit in the middle somewhere.
Maybe. I don't need to be escorted.
Like, y'all invited me to speak. She's just here with me. She not here to be no first lady. She's here to support me. Leave her be.
Don't take me into no private room. I don't need to be escorted. I don't want to stand still for people to come to me. I'm regular, and I want to model for people what I wish my pastor's wife had modeled for me. Just be your damn self. Just be yourself, because I would rather you be yourself and allow me to feel safe to develop into who myself is than for you to be pretentious and be fake, and me take that as an example, and neither one of us can live up to that standard. I'm not doing that.
Yeah, like a really big component of me deconstructing respectability was shifting my perspective of sin. I've talked about how fundamentalism uses shame as a framework for sin. So fundamentalism will stigmatize harmless act. To stigmatize something is to associate it with shame or disgrace. So it will stigmatize a harmless act and treat it like it's sin. But I don't use stigma and shame to frame sin anymore. I don't even use the term sin like that. I only use it as a teaching device. But what I use is harm. So once I made that shift in my theological framework and started to really reflect on the things that are harmful versus the things that have simply been stigmatized, I was like, oh, so there's a whole lot of stuff I was taught not to do. I was taught was inappropriate. I was taught was wrong. That really ain't harming nobody. So I'm going to let that stuff go in whatever way I possibly can, right? So when I decided to launch out with the faith community, and I had really worked through this whole difference between stigma, shame, and harm, I was like, oh, me cussing ain't hurt nobody. Now, it's stigmatized people associated with shame, because when people hear me cuss, particularly because of the position that I hold, they want to chastise me and police me. It happens to me every week. But for me, it was like, but I ain't harming nobody. So you can be as mad as you want to be. That's not my problem. because I'm not harming anybody. You come holler at me when you see me doing harm.
When I see you cussing out kids. When
Right.
I see you cussing your mama out. When I see you calling people all types of names out of misplaced anger, then your cussing is a problem.
Right.
Then you being harmful.
Exactly.
Then you being harmful.
But when you make that separation, you realize a lot of the stuff that's tied to respectability politics, a lot of the stuff that we see as sinful, because there is overlap there, right? When we talk about the sexual purity is not just respectability politics, it is sin, right? In our theological frameworks. When you start to parse through what's harmful and what's not, you realize a whole lot of this stuff is just completely made up. Like reading, we actually got Righteous Discontent by Dr. Higginbotham. So we've been reading the chapters on respectability politics, and one of the things that they were adamant about in the more conservative spaces with respectability politics is they didn't want people wearing loud colors.
Right. And Lord knows.
That's the blackest thing ever to wear. Like when you think about where we come from,
my whole closet is out of the wheel. Okay.
You see what I'm saying? Like you look at fashion in West Africa, it's so colorful. It's so incredibly colorful. So when I say like I'm in a colorful season of my life, part of that is just releasing myself of the respectability of not wearing loud colors.
And something else that I used to hear a lot when you were in seminary, this is before the faith community even started, was about being too common with your people.
Oh, God.
You can't be too common. And I never understood what that meant until Christian explained it. It was like, if you married to the pastor and y'all got a church, you can't be too common with your people. To me, that reads as, don't you be yourself in front of them. Don't be yourself in front of them. And that says a whole lot more about your ability to control yourself, ability to create boundaries and respect other people's boundaries. I'm gonna be myself. Everybody don't know everything, and some things are just appropriate for certain situations. But that whole don't be common with your members blows me. Okay, it blows me.
All of my elders told me that. Like, so we're here right now, Holy Smoke, Cigars, and Spirituality. When I told my elders about, my plans for ministry, because, I'm a preacher's kid, 5th generation Baptist preacher. So my ancestors were in the midst of that whole like creation of the politics of respectability in the Black church. Like I come from that. That's my heritage. And I remember like when I started to go towards pastoring, they were like, yeah, you can't show your members, you can't this, you can't that. And my thing was like, if I have to front for the people in my congregation, I'm just not gonna do it. Like that's what it was for me, right? Because like I don't have the energy to put on a mask every time I'm in front of the people that I serve in ministry. And I don't want people masking in front of me.
Right.
So I remember I was at a pastors and leaders conference and I was teaching a session and telling them about Holy Smokes. And I said, I tell the members of my community, if you see me at the bar, like, don't come up and ask me, what am I doing at the bar? Buy me a drink. You know what I'm saying?
You a drink.
If you see me smoking at the cigar lounge, don't come over here and ask me, what you doing smoking a cigar? You can come say hi, but if I'm by myself, leave me be and let me smoke my cigar. Mm-hmm. And my determination was, if I can't be myself, I just won't do it, because this work is too taxing to also have to mask who I am as an individual. And respectability politics puts that pressure on us to do that on a consistent basis. So, it's really a large part of how we see the world. What do we want people to walk away from this conversation with?
Fuck them rules, no. I'm playing.
Yeah, to a certain extent. Like,
yeah.
I mean, breaking all the rules It's about rule keeping theology.
Yeah.
And when we look at respectability politics, a lot of it just goes back to rules that we're supposed to keep. Like one of the phrases used in Righteous Discontent is morals and manners. Morals and manners. Right. It's the combining of those two. And we've seen a lot of people in the comments during the course of this conversation talk about, like, I prefer this word over that word. Like, somebody told me they prefer palatable over respectable. Somebody in the comments said I prefer appropriate over respectable. Right. So we all have different meanings for the words that we use and how we apply them. So if you take this phrase of morals and manners, like, it all depends on who is enlisting that phrase that determines what it means, because some people will tie morals and manners together.
Sure will.
So if you don't have the kind of manners that I think you should have, then you're immoral.
Yep.
Right. So a lot of that stuff comes up, and it's been passed down through generation to generation, and we're still wrestling with it now because of the way the language has been weaponized in some situations, like we were talking about earlier.
We're doing a lot of struggling with standards that we didn't set.
Yeah, like old girl in the video that Christina stitched earlier, right? She said, why is it if we encourage people to go outside looking like you care about yourself, like you respect yourself? That's the problem. You think somebody wearing a bonnet outside means they don't have self-respect.
My Lord.
That is the problem. That's the problem. You think it's a sign of disrespect, and the person is saying, like, no, like, this is just how I move through the world. I'm not saying you gotta wear a bonnet, but damn it, stop trying to police me and what I wear.
And my thing is, especially as Black women, if you know anything about going to get your hair done and how much time you spend in the shop, or if you do it yourself or somebody does it for you, you understand the money you spend, you understand the time you spend, you understand the maintenance that goes along with that. And protecting a hairstyle isn't a new thing. It's not new. When I'm in the airport, before I had locks, and even now, because I'll just pull my locks up because I don't want my hair touching everything. I don't want my hair all over the airplane seats. I don't want my hair all over the seats at the airport. Like, so, like the idea that you get sucked into the box that somebody who is looking at you created without them even having context, and you might have a bonnet on just because you want it. You might have pajama pants on just because you didn't feel like getting dressed for the airport. Some people believe that you should get dressed when you go outside. You should always be dressed because you never know who you might run into. That works for some people. I'm not trying to take that away from you. If that's how you feel, you should be airport cute. Go forth. I try to just look decent enough to like myself when I look in the mirror. And if you run into me while I'm traveling in context, you know.
But there used to be a time.
This ain't the Met Gala.
But there used to be a time where you did have to get dressed up to go to the airport, where, like, it was expected that the airport was like a dressy place. And in this generation, we're really just starting to pull back from that, because I remember, like, growing up thinking, like, yeah, you're supposed to, like, dress decent at the airport. Now all I care about is comfort. Like, I will avoid wearing dress clothes to the airport like the plague, because I just want to be comfortable. Right. So
right at 5'10" and a half, I ain't trying to have no dress pants and no button up blouse. Get out my face.
Yeah, and I'm 6'2", 300 pounds. So I no thank you. I have no desire. So, like, what do we want people to walk away?
You did ask that question, didn't you?
I mean, you know, it happens.
I want people to walk away feeling like they have more of a sense of autonomy and feeling like they understand the origins of the politics of respectability, because there are many versions of what people deem respectable and appropriate, but you have to determine which one is holding you bound the most and what you can do to work yourself out of that And that takes work, because it's not just about, well, I don't want to follow the rules. You got to think that thing through to the end. So what does not following this me? How does it impact me? How does it impact my relationships? Is that a risk I'm willing to take? All of that goes into being rebellious. So I'm not encouraging people to run out and do whatever they want to do. I'm encouraging people to think about the places where you feel restricted and figure out if that restriction is for your benefit or if it's for somebody else's benefit.
Yes. We should give you something else for that.
The enemy thought he had me, but Jesus said I am his, and he is mine. Glory, hallelujah.
What was that?
Yeah.
How? She changed keys on it. So I just wanted to point out what Leah said, because I love this. Leah Mia was like, baby, I just like getting dressed. I have on slips, hosiery, and high heels in my house every day.
My Lord.
I love that.
That's
for
what you love.
Oh my God, I love that for you. I really do. I think that's dope. Like, I think everybody should be able to do what makes them come alive. And if you want to wear a slip, hosiery, and heels around your house, do it until you feel good.
The word slip is traumatizing to me. Okay. If you see me in a slip, please believe I'm wearing it as a dress. It's got something like a jacket on it. I didn't freak that thing all the way out. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to echo what Pamela said as we close this. And the way I would say it is count the cost. Count the cost of all of your decisions.
Know your why.
Know why you're doing it and count the cost, right? If you're not going to abide by the politics of respectability in any given space, understand what that's going to cost you. And then make sure you're okay with that. Because I get it. Sometimes you're not okay with what it's going to cost you. That's the cost of living in the world that we live in, with all of these systems and structures that we have to abide in. I mean, we do it on social media every day. That's why I write like Patreon. Like I spell it out Pay. I don't just say Patreon in the captions on my videos, because I know if I do that, it's going to get censored. I did a video yesterday on J. Edgar Hoover and the Black Panthers, and that video is underperforming. It's performing well. It's underdistributed because of what I was saying, because of the content that I was talking about, right? So you gotta be aware of the cost of everything that you do, or I encourage you to become aware of the cost of everything that you do. Like, is the juice worth the squeeze?
Think it through. And I think, to acknowledge the places that a lot of us come from, we have been itching to be free. We've been itching to find a space where we can be rebellious. We've been itching to find comrades to fight back against this harmful. We've been itching. So we want to a lot of times break every rule, say F everything. I'm not doing that. I'm not wearing that. I'm not saying that. And we don't think it through to the end. And the next thing you know, you being bombarded with backlash that you didn't prepare for because you were impulsive in your rebellion.
Yeah.
You were impulsive. And I know we all want to fight back. I know we all want to break the chains of whatever has had us bound, whether it was our clothing or our sexuality or not even being able to explore our sexual selves. But don't do damage by being impulsive. Think it through. Because
you probably gonna get blackballed in certain spaces. If you decide to live out loud completely, certain spaces are not going to accept you. So, for people who live vicariously through my clapbacks, because I know I hear that a lot, right?
With your disrespectful self.
Right. That is a byproduct of being independent. I am not, as a minister, dependent on any system outside of the faith community. So I don't make a living flying around speaking at places. Like that's something that people in my circle like benefit from. Like coming up earlier in my ministry, I thought that was going to be a major component of the work that I do. And you know, it's still time. We'll see what happens. But I had to sacrifice that income to be myself. Mm-hmm. I had to sacrifice that income in order to be myself because my itinerary dried up when I decided, oh, okay, I'm gonna be myself. And then they said, well, you can't come back here. You gotta be aware of that. I encourage you to be aware of that because you know, there's a cost associated with everything. So I hope this was helpful. In understanding respectability,
giving people some language. I know I picked up some language doing this research. Definitely picked up some language.
Absolutely. So you know, we're gonna be back next time, deconstructing harmful theology, building beloved community, one cigar at a time. Peace out.
Peace and blue magic hair grease.